You may not know it to look at this, but this thing actually weighs 35 pounds. And so the question is like, okay, we got the bad news. What in the world do we do now? Well, I've talked about this on the channel before, but I think it's worth bringing up again. It's something that Holly and I like to call the lemonade principle. And essentially, what it refers to is when you've been working really hard and long for something and you experience setbacks, when you finally do achieve what you've been waiting for and working towards, it's that much sweeter after that struggle than it would be if you just got it right away and there wasn't a struggle. And so the reason we call it the lemonade principle is because imagine that you're out working all day outside, you're doing yard work or something, you're mowing the lawn, you're weed whipping, you're working up a sweat, you're getting really, really thirsty, it's a hot day, and then you go inside and you pour yourself a tall, cool glass of lemonade and you swig from it, and it's incredible. It's the best lemonade you've ever had. Why? Partly because you've worked up for it. You're really sweaty and thirsty, and that makes it taste all the much sweeter. Compare that to a situation where you've been just sitting inside in air-conditioned room all day. You haven't been working hard. You've just kind of been sitting around. You haven't worked up a sweat. You're not particularly thirsty, and you go into the kitchen and you pour that exact same glass of lemonade, and it's cold and it's a tall, cool glass of lemonade, and you pour it and you drink it, and it's whatever. It's not the greatest thing in the world. There's something about working extra hard to get something, taking extra long to get to where you're trying to get to, that makes it that much more special. Hi there, folks. I'm Sean the Modern Yeoman, and this is Henry the Little Yeoman, and we'd like to welcome you back to another episode of the Modern Yeoman. As the title suggests, we have some not so good news, some bad news, setback really, on the Barndo front. I'll tell you about that a little bit later, but first there's a couple of other things I want to update you guys on and answer some viewer questions or clarify some things. So first I think I'm going to drop this guy off. Say goodbye, Henry. He says bye. So chick update, the new layer chicks are doing great. I actually need to change their litter right now, they're due. But before I do that, I think right now would be a really good opportunity to talk about my brooder setup. A couple of viewers brought up some concerns about the way that I have my brooder set up. A heat lamp over my stock tank, and then in addition to the heat lamp, I also have this brooder panel, which, as I mentioned in the previous video, that brooder panel, the bottom of it heats up, and it's intended to mimic the heat from a hen. And so a couple of viewers wisely pointed out, isn't that too much heat? Where are the chicks gonna get away from the heat if they get too warm? And that was a very good question. Initially, I'd set it up, and I should have spent more time explaining how I set it up in the previous video, but because I do think it's very important. You know, your brooder setup is very important. It's very dangerous if you don't do it right, both for the chicks and potentially things burning down. So it is worth mentioning and spending some time talking about. Initially, I'd set this up where I had the heat lamp right here, and then over here in this section, I had the actual brooder panel over there. So this entire stock tank was covered with heat. Nowhere could the chicks get away from the heat. And so a couple of people brought up, where will the chicks go to escape the heat? There's too much warmth there. That's a good point. After that video, I ended up moving the brooder panel, which I always do. And like I said, I should have made it a point to show this process, but I did move the brooder panel over here. So there is a section of the stock tank over there that isn't covered by constant heat. It's on this side of the stock tank. And so there's two primary concerns. Number one, too much heat for the chicks, and number two, fire hazard. Anyone that's had heat lamps knows that they are a fire hazard. There's been so many stories of people that have had their barns or their garages or their sheds burned down because of heat lamps. And so let me really quickly explain how I've got things set up here now and why I have them set up and why I have two sources of heat. So number one, you'll note that the heat lamp is up here. It's up high. Now, if you go to a place where you buy chicks, Tractor Supply or Rural King or your local farm co-op or whatever, take a look at the stock tanks that they keep their chicks in. You'll, more often than not, you'll see that the heat lamp is down in the stock tank. It needs to be somewhat close to the chicks so they can get the full effect of that heat lamp's heat. If it's up too high, they won't get as warm as they should. This, the way I have it set up, I have it set up like this over the hardware cloth with the cinder block blocking it from wood so it won't burn the wood, it won't overheat the wood. The only thing it's touching is the cinder block in the metal hardware cloth. I have it set up like this for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't want critters getting in here into the chicks at night, so I need to have a lid of some kind. And then number two, again, I don't want it getting too close to the wood, so I needed to come up with some sort of way to keep it away from the surrounding wood frame. And so what I came up with is this hardware cloth. It rests on the hardware cloth. It rests on the cinder block. It's not getting too close to things it's not getting so close to wood that it'll pose a fire hazard. I've been doing it this method now for 2 years, and it's been good for me. Now, because it's up this high, it doesn't get the heat down as much as it should to the chicks. Because of that, I figured I'll need a supplementary source of heat, and that's where the brooder panel comes in. Now, you may say, Sean, why not just use the brooder panel? Shouldn't the brooder panel be enough? And the answer is, unfortunately, it's not. When it gets really cold at night, and lately it's been getting down into the high 30s, low 40s at night, and it won't be long before it's getting down into the low 30s, below freezing at night. When you do have it set up with just the brooder panel, I'm going to rest this on my head, with just the brooder panel, if the chicks decide to go out from underneath the brooder panel at night, there's a chance they could die. I think that's what happened last year with one of our turkey chicks. We just had the brooder panel. We didn't have the heat lamp when it was out here. We ended up moving them inside. But we just had the brooder panel, and there was a turkey chick that was like over here, and she was unfortunately dead. And I think it was because she wandered out for water or something at night, and it was just too cold. It was frigid in this side of the stock tank, and I think she perished because of that. With this setup, I have the heat from the brooder lamp, I have the heat from the heat lamp, which is... It isn't full force, again, because it's higher up, but it does keep the atmosphere in here warm enough to where the chicks won't die if they wander out from underneath the brooder panel. I like the brooder panel, but that's the setback. If those chicks wander away from it at night, there's a chance they won't. It'll be too cold, and they'll freeze before they have a chance to get back under it. I found that this works. Now, this side of the stock tank is cool enough. It keeps them cool if they need to get away from the heat. It's not overheated on this side of the stock tank. So good question to the folks that brought that up. And this is why I have it set up this way. It's been working great. It's been working great so far. The 1 year we didn't try it with the turkeys, where it was just the brooder panel, was when one of them died. So I think I'm going to continue using this method. Chicks seem happy. The chicks are nice and healthy, all 7 of them. I'm going to change their litter now because it's been a week now and it's starting to get kind of nasty. They're getting bigger, so I'm going to need to change it a lot more frequently than just once a week now that they're getting older and pooping a lot more. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, but good question, good comment. That's why I thought it was important to bring this up. The Porcine Palace. They've really done a number on the forage that I opened up to them just, a week ago? I was telling you guys about it. It wouldn't take them long, and it hasn't. Now that I've got these 3 strands of fence, I'm going to be opening up to that area next, which I'm sure they'll do a number on that as well. But that's not the reason I brought you guys down here. The issue of concern is the fact that it's going to start freezing overnight here soon. We're going to start getting down into the low 30s overnight, probably here within a few weeks, if not less than that. Maybe we're talking about days. And the thing about cold weather is that it's not conducive to hose equipment. So I run this hose all the way down from way up by my house. Down here in the woods, geez, I'm several hundred yards away from the hose spigot that this comes from. So we've got a lot of hoses that we've run down here. It's cheaper than actually getting water run down here permanently. Now that we're getting into winter, this solution might not work long term. Now granted, I will be slaughtering the pigs in February or March, but that's still several months of freezing overnight weather that I need to contend with, and I need to bring water down. The thing about the freezing weather, you know, the hoses themselves, I think, can handle it. They'll thaw out after they've been frozen. But this stuff, the connections, all my connection points, as well as like the water guns, they will break. I've been here for, 2 winters, and every winter I've made the same mistake of just leaving these out for a few nights in the cold, only to discover that I break them. So I don't want to break them anymore, because that's a problem. I can't keep breaking my water wands and my water guns. I can't do that. So I need to figure out a way to bring down water from way up there where the house is, hundreds of yards away, 100 plus yards away, way down here in the woods where the pigs are. I've been keeping these cat litter tubs filled with water down here just as like a backup when I don't have the hose connected down here. I may just need to get like 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 of these, keep them in the mudroom in our house, have them constantly stock, and just rotate them and bring them down on the 4-wheeler with the pig's food every day and just rotate out the water. I could get more elaborate. I could build some sort of crazy system, some sort of bucket system, and fill that up. But those are harder to do when you're mobile. And these pigs are mobile. I could also do what Joel Salatin does and just like actually have PVC water dug through in a trench and bring it down here. Maybe one day, especially when we get sheep in the back pasture. But for now, I don't think that's in the cards. I'd like to spend a little more time figuring out where water should go before I make the investment and actually dig trenches and put PVC pipe down. That's not just an investment of money, but an investment of resources and infrastructure, where I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing before I do that. So I need to get water down here in the winter. My plan right now is to use these things. That's probably what I'll do. That still doesn't help with the pig's need for a trough, a wallow. This is what they've been using for their wallow. You can see it's empty. I need to fill it. I don't know how much pigs need wallows in winter. That's something I should read up on. I think it's more of a summer thing, but I don't know. My solution for the water thing is to bring down those litter boxes or whatever, just jugs of water that have caps on them that I can haul down every day. That's what I'm gonna do. If anyone has any other ideas, please, I'm all ears. So you're probably wondering what the bad news is. Hang on, I'm fiddling with my knife here, which, by the way, before I get into the bad news, good news is this knife is incredible. I think I mentioned it a few episodes back. My friends at Permapastures Farm, William, Billy, sent along this gift of a knife. ESEE, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. This is a solid farm knife, man. It's just a great, robust piece of steel. I've used it several times now, and it's just like, it's heavy. You may not know it to look at this, but this thing actually weighs 35 pounds. I'm kidding, but it's like really heavy, and it's solid, and it's robust, and I've used it for many different things. I love this knife. Anyways, the bad news. The bad news is, long story short, the soil map that we got back for the septic tank for Nana Jana's Barndo build, the soil map's not good. So this area where I'm standing right here is the proposed site for Nana Jana's Barndo build. And the good news is that we can put a septic tank here. The bad news is that this land, where you see all these little pink flags around me, is not suitable for a drain field, a leach field, whatever you want to call it, which is bad news. It's a setback. It means we can't begin the process of building yet. And so the question is like, okay, we got the bad news. what in the world do we do now? Well, thankfully there are a few steps forward that we can take. While the drain field can't be in this area, we can potentially run a line out to an area that is suitable, maybe north of the barn, maybe down there in the front pasture, away from the garden. We wouldn't want the drain field by the garden, but there are a couple of other sites there's some frustration with that because number one, we don't know if they are suitable. We just have to run another test in those places. And number two, that will involve digging a long trench. If there is a suitable spot, it will involve digging a long trench and getting that line out there. So right now we're actually having the soil scientist come out, I think in a week, maybe 2 weeks, to take a look at some other sites and let us know what she thinks about their suitability for potential drain field sites. You know, while I have her out, I might actually have her take a look at those mystery holes. In fact, I will have her take a look at those mystery holes that I mentioned in the previous episode. If anyone's going to know what those weird holes are, it's going to be a soil scientist. So I'll have her take a look at those when she's out. So yeah, find a new spot for the drain field. It's a setback. We're still waiting. We're still in a waiting loop at this point. We can't move forward. We were wanting to move forward, but that's been put on pause. The brakes have been put on the process, unfortunately. There is another option. If nothing else works, we could go completely off grid and do like a composting toilet / gray water system, which a lot of people have done. You see YouTube videos on it. A lot of people have done with great success. So that might be the direction we go in. It puts my whole slowly philosophy to the test because granted there isn't a rush on this, but we're excited to get moving. We're hoping to get this area excavated before winter set in. We have no idea what the process is going to be like. And so it brings up that whole lemonade principle that I brought up earlier in the video, where sometimes the things that you have to wait for are that much sweeter when you get them. This might be one of those things. We're really having to put in our due diligence here to do this right. And it's taking longer than we expected. We're going to figure it out one way or the other. And even if that means going a non-traditional route of something like a composting toilet, we'll do it. That's the bad news, guys. That's what happened. That's what we found out. Our next stop is waiting for the soil scientist to come back out again and let us know where she thinks we might be able to put a drain field in. What do you see, Bubba? Well, thanks for hanging out with us, my friends. Yes, it's a disappointment that the Barndo project is on a little bit of a standstill right now, but we'll get moving with it as soon as we can. That's the nature of the game in this world. We'll obviously keep you updated, give you the scoop as we get new news. But until then, the things that are really, really important, like this guy, those are good. He's very healthy. He's actually just got sleeping. He's been up a lot more during the day, which is good. And that's something I need to remind myself about. So, until we see you guys again next time, remember, it's the way things are out here. Slowly.